Our speaker this evening is Dr. Ron Green. Dr. Green holds a PhD in Buddhist Studies. He specializes in Asian religions and has been teaching in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies since 2008. Without further ado, please put your hands together and welcome Dr. Ron Green.
All right. Thank you. And I can say Namaste to you. And we had our last speaker was Dr. Sanford. Some of you were able to see her here, and she's a specialist in Hinduism. And in Hinduism, they often say Namaste, and people that meet each other on the street in India do this. And it has a meaning that blessed be, you might say. Sometimes you hear it translated like that. And this comes from something in ancient India that also you see in Buddhism. And the idea is that even though they're not thinking this often when they're meeting each other on the street and doing this symbol, it actually comes from early Hinduism and the idea of I recognize the sacred that's inside you. So just like when we're shaking hands, sociologists might say it might have come from the Middle East where we're saying I'm not armed, you know. We're not usually thinking that when we shake hands with our friends. In the same way, usually they're not thinking, oh, you're sacred. However, it has that meaning. And for Buddhism, we have this too. In Buddhism, there's kind of a meaning of not Brahman, the all-pervasive holiness that Hinduism has, and the Atman, that sacredness, that spark inside us all that's also Brahman. It's a little different in Buddhism. For Buddhism, depends on which Buddhist you ask, because there's a lot of different sects of Buddhism, if we can call them sects. But you often hear that it's Buddha nature, that we all have Buddha nature. And this is an interesting idea to me because this is the topic of this talk is sustainability, Buddhism, sustainability and peace. And part of, I hope you guys know, some of you might not know, you guys that just came this time. This is part of a series on religions and peace that goes on monthly at Lackey Chapel, and hopefully we'll keep doing it next year as well, maybe with a different topic. But different religions have, a chance to talk about what they think of a certain issue. And for Buddhism, I think this idea of nature, in Buddha nature, is not an accident, that it's also nature like nature. Actually, nature is not just there, right? This is nature and this is nature. So for Buddhism, this is Buddha nature. And for you guys that, I know that some of you might know a little Sanskrit or maybe Chinese, that the idea, the word in Sanskrit is bodhicitta, which means bodhi is the same root as Buddha, is awakening. So it doesn't really mean enlightenment. We usually say enlightenment, right, when you talk about the Buddha's enlightenment. So it's really awakening that is the root, Bodhi. The Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree. And that we are all, everybody in this room, according to Buddhists, are Bodhisattvas. We're awakening beings. And that that's kind of twofold. We're ourselves in the process of awakening, but we're also awakening other beings with the things that we do. Hopefully. It's not going the other way. But this is the idea that bodhicitta, actually the bodhi means awakening. The chitta means, when it's written in Chinese, it's the kokoro for Japanese. It's the heart, awakened heart. So you might say awakened mind or Buddha mind is how it's usually translated. But actually, if you look at it more carefully and see what it became in China when Chinese Buddhism started, it's actually awakened heart. And there's this idea in Buddhism that when you view things with an awakened heart, and that's kind of the trick, right? How do we do that? When you view things with awakened heart, you come to see other beings that have awakened heart, and you see the awakening in other beings, and that's why we can say this. I can recognize your Buddha nature. I can see that in you. And in fact, that this Buddha nature, that we all have awakening, that we're all innately have this in our nature. It's not only in your heart, but it's all around us. And this in Buddhism, some of you may know this expression in Buddhism, a technical term. It's called the Dharmakaya, and it means the Dharma realm. We're in the Dharma realm, the realm of the Dharma, the Buddha's teaching. In Buddhism, the Dharma. In Hinduism, the Dharma is your duty, as we were talking about with the Bhagavad Gita, the Dharma. Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, it's your duty to fight. Arjuna doesn't want to fight, but he says, it's your duty, it's your Dharma, that the gods created you for this job because you were born into that caste. In Buddhism, it's different. Buddhism kind of rejects the caste system, you might say, that everybody is equal, everybody has Buddha nature, that the person in what is considered by other people lowest caste is the same as the person in the upper caste, that everybody has Buddha nature. The trick is awakening it. We all have equal ability to awaken it. And so how do we do that? So I was thinking about this, and I just wrote this sentence down, and I'll read it to you. When I was thinking about sustainability and peace in Buddhism, so I wrote this down. How can we maintain and sustain the treasure heritage that is ours in the earth? And maybe this requires rewriting some of the ancient stories. And this treasure heritage that I speak of, by the way, some people at Coastal, some of the publicity people wanted to know what is the treasure heritage in the earth that I'm talking about. And I said, well, I actually wrote that to be provocative so that you'd come in here. So come and find out, please. And if I tell you and you print it, then no one's going to find it provocative anymore. So anyway, the treasure heritage that's ours, that we inherit, and it's partly our Buddha nature, and it's I want to describe to you this idea in Buddhism that when I say our Buddha nature and my Buddha nature or my Buddha heart and yours and nature out there or nature here, in Buddhism it's not separate things. So one of the purposes of meditation in Buddhism, and I'm speaking generally, you have a lot of different groups in Buddhism, but generally speaking, one of the purposes of meditation is to kind of break down this construction of self as individuals and realize that nature, that we are nature, that there's no limit that's here's where I end and here's where nature begins. So, and it's true with a lot of things, that here's where I begin and here's where you begin. Here's many things that you can say. Here's black and here's white, and all of these things that we separate because it helps us to survive, and the mind naturally does those kind of things, aren't necessarily ultimately true. And in some sense, it actually harms us to have those identities that we've constructed. We've constructed by various means and because of various things, because it's the mind's natural activity to be able to get food by saying, there's a tiger, there's me, here's a spear, I'm going to stick it, or whatever. And then, so that's one reason. But there's, I think there's a lot of things like social reasons. Not only is it naturally in us as people to do that in our minds, but also there's social constructions that tell us who we are. But again, maybe some of these are good and some of these are bad, and maybe it hurts us to have some of these social constructions. So Buddhists like to examine those kind of things. And I'm reminded several things of Buddhism when I think about the earth and its sustainability. I think about the Buddha when he reached enlightenment. So the story says that when the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, the tree of awakening, which is also interesting already because it's connection with nature. Have you ever noticed these, a lot of old religious studies people talked about this, a lot of these symbols connect the earth and the sky, right? And maybe whatever your vision or the religion's vision of the sky is, or maybe the sacred or heaven even, some of these symbols connect us, such as you might say the Bodhi tree. The Bodhi tree connects the earth and the sky in a sense. It connects the universe. It connects the person under the Bodhi tree with the universe. And the person under the Bodhi tree realizes he or she is not separate from the universe in a sense. This Bodhi tree is a symbol of this connection. You might say Christianity, the cross, is a symbol of the intermediary, the Jesus, the intermediary person between humans and God. So it's this cross connects the earth and sky again. And a lot of religions have this. Shinto has the pole in the field. A lot of religions have this kind of pole. Anyway, the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, and the Buddha awakened, according to the stories. And the first thing that the Buddha did when the Buddha awakened was touch the earth. Did you guys know that? The Buddha reaches over his knee, and he touches the earth. He touches the earth. Well, there's a lot of people that analyze this in various ways. But one thing that the Buddha does is he asks the earth to be witness to his awakening. And the most famous version of this story, the Mahayana most famous writer, is Ashvaghosha, who was a famous Sanskrit poet who lived maybe, I think, 1 to 200, somewhere in there, AD. And he collected all of the old stories that he could find of the Buddha and put it together in one biography. And Ashvaghosha, he says something funny because he's a great Sanskrit poet that was famous for, writing these beautiful lines. Still today, Ashvaghosha is considered the most beautiful Sanskrit writer of all time. And he describes the Buddha touching the earth. And he says, when the Buddha awakened completely and he touched the earth, that's female, the earth shook in 7 ways like an overjoyed woman. I'll let you figure out that metaphor. But nature was happy, I think, is one thing that it was saying, that nature recognized and witnessed that the Buddha had this awakening moment. Another thing that you guys, some of you know Japanese Buddhism, I think, that are here. There's a famous figure, not only in Japanese Buddhism, but in other countries' Buddhist groups as well. But in Japan, it's called Jizo, and Jizo is Kristigarbha. His name means the womb of the earth. And he's a bodhisattva, just like all you guys are. He's an awakening being. He's awakening other people. And he has the storehouse knowledge of the earth. So that in Japan, he's extremely popular. He's one of the most popular bodhisattvas in Japan. I have to say he may be the most, besides Avalokitesvara, the canon in Japanese. He's the bodhisattva of compassion. Probably Jizo, the earth, the storehouse of the earth, is probably either as equally popular or maybe more popular. But anyway, there's a lot of these in Buddhism, symbols of the earth and the symbols of the Buddha's awakening being connected to the earth. I want to tell you a couple of stories because I like to do that for one thing, and this gives me a chance to do it outside my class, so I can tell kind of different types of stories here, I think. But one of them, this isn't a fictive story, but have you guys heard about these? What's it called? Earth treasure vases, the earth treasure vases. This is from Tibetan Buddhist tradition. And this is becoming kind of popular around America right now, and I think it's a good idea. Even though it's ritualistic, I think there's a good reason for this ritual. And I think it kind of illustrates what I'm thinking about when I say, should we rewrite the ancient stories for modern times? And what this is, this group of Tibetan monks are making these kind of vessels, a vase or a vase, and they're putting some things in it, some sacred things in it, And these things could be anything from seeds to anything, to mala beads, to Buddha's mala beads, and they put these things in there, and they say some prayers. They say, may all beings. Maybe this isn't a prayer. I don't know. We can say what's a prayer and what's not a prayer. May all beings be awakened. May all beings experience peace. And may the earth be healed. May the earth be maintained and sustained. And then they send these to various people around the country and around the world, so that you can look on YouTube and look up Earth Treasure Vase, I think, and you'll see different people have these. But I know that Wendy Johnson, who we met in California not long ago, she's a gardener and she's a Buddhist, and she works at Green Gulch Farm that feeds the Zen Center in San Francisco. She got one of these, and she got a group, some of the people from Earth First and some other environmentalist group, and they all went out to the redwood forest where it says, "Do not enter," and they went in there, and they dug with their hands. And they buried this in here. Oh, by the way, they also put their own personal items in there. And they blessed this thing. And they buried it with their hands. And she asked, it was in a copper container. So she asked some of the environmentalists, is this bad that we're putting this copper container in the redwood forest? And they all agreed that copper's good, that maybe this is okay. So they buried this thing. And it was very emotional, she says. They started crying, and they said these prayers like, you know what they did? They they recited Dr. Seuss the Lorax, "I speak for the trees." Isn't that wonderful? It's interesting stuff, though. I think that there's really something important going on with this kind of thing. Even though it's ritualistic, and in modern times we have kind of a distaste for ritual, I think there's something important that can be said about this kind of thing. The Dhammapada, the teachings of the Buddha, one of the many scriptures in Buddhism, the Dhammapada says, the basic teaching, you might say, that has been cited by many Buddhists over the years, the Dhammapada says, cultivate all that's good, reject all that's evil. This is the teachings of all Buddhas of all times. And there's a famous story that there was a Chinese philosopher who was a Confucian philosopher. And he wanted to debate philosophy like some philosophers like to do, no offense. But actually, debating philosophy is good. But he invited Buddhist, a top Buddhist that he thought was a philosopher, to come in and talk to him about Buddhist philosophy. You know, you have all these scriptures. They say the Chinese Buddhist canon is, I think they say something like 80 times larger than the Bible, New and Old Testament. It's huge, right? So come tell us the deep philosophy of the Buddha. And he says, okay. So the guy goes the Buddhist goes to his house, and he says, cultivate good, reject evil. This is the teachings of all Buddhists. And the guy just looked at him and said, that's the teaching? That's the deep, profound teachings of your master? He says, my 6-year-old daughter knows that. And the Buddhist answered, your 6-year-old daughter knows that, but even a gray-haired old man like you can't do it. That's the trick, right? Cultivate all good, reject all evil. This is the teachings of the Buddhas. Cultivate's interesting to me because I'm talking about sustainability. What's cultivate and what's sustain? When we talk about cultivate, if you look it up, you're going to see till. Sorry, I'm Southern. T-I-L-L. Till, right? Till. But it's funny, because if you look up till, it has a Indo-European root, or what they call Proto-Indo-European root. So the people that study language families will tell you that between India and Europe, there was a language in the old days, and that this language people spoke and they split. And some of them went to Europe and some of them went to India. And this language became Sanskrit. It changed. And this language became Latin. And all of those other languages, such as Spanish and French and so forth, and into English. So that some of the Sanskrit terms, we have words that sound a lot like them, those terms. So if you look up and by the way, they believe there was a proto or a pre-Indo-European language that some linguists have tried to reconstruct because they know what the Indo-European words were, but what came before that? So they look at these roots and say, well, since all of these languages have this, there must have been a common origin to it. So they try to reconstruct it. And one of these words is till, that they believe is a proto-independent Indo-European word. And this means actually to hold or to have near, rather than to till the land up with a rototiller. And this is interesting to me also because I know, Emily, that you saw this film. There's a film out there free on the internet that's called Back to Eden. And it's about a Christian farmer who decided that he wanted to farm like God meant for him to farm. And so he reinterprets Genesis and other passages, especially the Gospels, in a way that he thinks helps him with farming. And he says, it's really interesting to me, this kind of thing, about tilling the land. He says he believes that tilling the land is not how God meant for us, what he meant for us to do. That in Eden, even though we were kicked out of Eden, that the land wasn't tilled. And if you look in Genesis, it says a mist rose up and watered the plants, that you don't have to keep doing this stuff. So this guy believes he had inspiration from God. He asked God, what am I doing wrong? My plants keep failing. And he said, God answered him, spoke to his heart, he said. And he said, if you look back in Genesis, when the people are kicked out of Eden, the first thing they do when they're kicked out, if you do remember, they start tilling the land. They start breaking the land up. And he believes that this destroys the microorganisms. So this is kind of a newish thing a lot of people are kind of picking up on now, that when you till the land like that, you kill the microorganisms that actually help your plants grow. And it makes it harder for the earth to retain water for your plants to grow. And so what this guy did is he covered the land with what you see exactly what you see out there. He looked into the forest and he saw that nowhere on the earth that's left natural is it naked, right? Is it bare? And so he covered the earth and his plants grew like crazy. And the soil was no longer that kind of what you see when you drive down the road and see tilled soil that has been added the nutrients and so forth, the chemicals. It's not that look. His soil was all rich and smelled good, and it has earthworms in it. And so this is interesting that he found this, he thinks, through God. And this idea of till and cultivate in this way, hold it near rather than till it up. This idea of cultivate, if you think about it, it also has the same root as culture, right? Culture, like we're building culture. So when I ask how can we sustain and maintain the heritage, it has to do with culture, I think. And another meaning of culture, another way we use culture is a culture that grows bacteria, right? You grow bacteria in culture. And I think that this kind of culture is another way of looking at, the Buddha says, cultivate all that's good. I don't think it means till it up. I think it means something else, grow it. Grow what's good. Grow it in your heart, and grow it around you. Grow it in the people around you. So this is interesting to me. Now, how do you do that, again, is the hard part. And in Buddhism, there's a lot of stories of how the Buddha cultivated good. And they're told in a series of stories called the Jatakas. The Jatakas mean, are basically, there's a lot of different kinds of Jatakas. I think there's 550 Jataka. Jataka are stories of the Buddha's past lives. And we don't have to believe them. In fact, I think that most Buddhists would tell you that they're metaphors to tell us how we should cultivate good. And so I'll just tell you really quickly a couple. And again, there's 550 of these, but I'll spare you. I'll just tell you a couple. There is the Jataka tale of, in a previous life, the Buddha was a prince, just like he was in the last life when he was the Buddha. But he was a prince in a kingdom. He was set to be king. And this kingdom had a treasure. And this treasure was a white elephant. Interesting in Indian religions, you guys that know about Indian religions, white elephant is an auspicious symbol. Indra rides a white elephant in Hinduism, right? There's white elephants in a lot of stories. When the Buddha before he was born, his mother dreamed of a white elephant, right? All of this is symbolism. They had a treasure, and the treasure was a white elephant. And elephants in India are also often associated with rain, the monsoon. And so this elephant had a magical power. It brought rain. And so his village never had problems with that. They, had this elephant. And there was another village close by that did have problems. They had droughts. And so the villagers one time came to this village and they asked, "Can we have your white elephant?" And the Bodhisattva, who's not the Buddha yet, he's in a previous life, said, "Yeah, please take the white elephant. You guys need it." Well, the villagers didn't like that. As you can imagine, when we send stuff to other people, a lot of people don't like that either. But this is telling us something about why he's born in the next life as going to be the Buddha, right? And so he cultivated this. And the story goes on to tell us he gave away his white elephant, and the people in the village got angry at him, and they kicked him out of the village. And so he took his family, he had 2 children and his wife, and they loaded up a cart full of goods, and they started out, and they went to the forest because the village didn't want them anymore. And on the way out there, the gods appear in this story. The gods appeared, the Hindu gods, and Indra disguised himself. And Indra said, "I'm a poor man, I'm a beggar, I don't have anything. You guys look full and you're a prince and all this stuff. You've lived a good life. Let me have your cart. Let me have all the stuff in your cart." And the Bodhisattva says, "Okay, you need it, you can take it," right? And so he gives it away. And then Indra decides to test him more. So Indra appears again and says, "I'm an old man, I don't have anybody to work my fields anymore because my back's thrown out and all this. Can I have your children?" And I know I know it's not politically correct because children aren't possessions, but nevertheless, he gives away his children. And then, of course, you guys can figure it out by now, Indra appears again and says, "I don't have anybody to cook for me, and I need your wife." And so he says, "Okay." And then, he lives happily ever after because Indra says, "Aha, I was just testing you. I'm going to give you all these things back. And in fact, I'm going to open the minds of the villagers where you were, and they're going to take you back in, accept you as prince. You did a good thing." So that's the end of that Jataka, that we should cultivate this idea. Maybe none of it happened, but, it's a metaphor. In another one, just quickly, so this one's shorter. In another one, in a previous life, the Bodhisattva was out wandering around, and he and 2 other two other guys in India were wandering around, and he came upon a cliff, and he looked over this cliff, and down at the bottom of the cliff, he saw a hungry tigress. And this hungry tigress had two cubs, and the cubs were very hungry. They were skinny. You could see their ribs. And he knew that the hungry tigress had been starving for so long that she was too weak to hunt. She couldn't stand up. So he tells the guys that are with him, we have to try to save her. And they say, it's too far back to the village. We'll never make it in time. And when by the time we come back, they'll be dead. And he says to them, well, we got to try anyway. We have to try. So you guys go back to the village and bring some food, and I'll stay here and watch them and see what happens to them. And so they leave. And do you know what he did? He threw himself off the cliff and fed the hungry tigress and her cubs. Not a good plan. But I think it's all metaphor. It's metaphor for cultivating your Buddha heart, your Buddha nature, and to break down the barriers between us and them. And this, even though it's kind of horrific stories, I think it tells us something about Buddhism. Just kind of quickly, let me talk about some more words, this maintain. If you think about the word maintain and sustain, okay, if you look at these words, if you look it up in the computer, like in one of the dictionaries on the computer, maintain has these roots, main and tain. That's two parts of the word. And this main also, there's Latin, there's, I think, man or mon, but there's Indo-European roots to it too. And we know what happened to it, not just when it came and became Latin, but what happened to it when it became Sanskrit. And what happened was, if you think about man, so this is maintain, right? Because I'm talking about maintain and sustain. Man, or I should say human, because not gender, right? Human, comes from this same root. And if you think about that, what other words do we know in other languages for man? It's also hand, right? Hand. Monos y monos, hand and man, and or human. If you think of the other roots that you know in other language, other words, you might think of home, right? Or hombre, right? Yeah, That's right, okay. And then that word, if you think of that, there's another word in Sanskrit that is important to Buddhists and very important to Hindus, and it's related to that same root. It comes from the same root. That's right. Exactly right. And you can tell when you think about home, right? It's om. This word om has the same root as human. So I think that's kind of interesting. And homo, right? Like homo sapien. It's the same root. Om. What's om? I guess all of you know om. You've at least seen it on cartoons, right? Om is the sacred syllable. Om is a syllable that in Hinduism that they say in the Upanishads. One of the characters in the Upanishad goes to the king of death and says, I want to know what happens after I die. And the king of death says, ask for another favor. I'll give you anything. And he says, I don't want anything. I want to know what happens after you die. That's why I came to death. Death's door, And he says, okay, good. I was just testing you. But I can't tell you because that's beyond ideation, right? It's beyond thought. It's something that's eternal. There's something different that you can't reason to with logic. You have to experience it. And the way that you do that is through Om. That you can experience this through Om. Buddhists also. You can experience Buddha nature, your Buddha nature, through Om, according to Buddhists. Why? Because Om consists of three sounds. Ah, U, and right? And you open your mouth and you close it. Om. And when you do that, something happens, a vibration. And according to Hinduism, that vibration is the cosmic sound. All of this is vibration. Physics tells us that too, right? Not only ancient Hindus from 2000 BC, but physics. This is vibration. This is moving. This is vibrations. Our brain's on a wave. Our thoughts. All of this is moving. It's vibrations. And Om, by ancient wisdom, they've tried a lot of stuff, right? I mean, how do we know that? How does acupuncture work? Because acupuncture seems to work sometimes. How did they figure that out? A lot of trial and error? I don't know. But somehow there was some ancient wisdom. Something happened, These people knew something. And they knew something about Om. And what Om does, if you try it, I'm sure maybe a lot of you have tried Om before, but if you do that, and by the way, in Sanskrit, they say Om has all of the sounds in Sanskrit. Like every word in Sanskrit has either or sound in it. So it's the seed syllable for all language, and language is sacred, according to Hindus and Buddhists. So if you do this, and you're meditating, this sound at the end vibrates in your ears, and it does a lot of things to you. It puts your vibrations on the same vibrations as all around you, and it also cuts off the discursive thought process, so that we're blabbing all this stuff, we're evaluating constantly. The Buddha says that the basic thing that the mind does is evaluate. Oh, I don't like this. I want to get rid of this thing I have. I want something I don't have, right? Constantly that we're doing this. Om stops that. Om puts that vibration into your mind that changes. There's a qualitative change in your thought pattern. And this is verified by science. All over the country, the University of Wisconsin, the psychology department is doing brain imaging. The Dalai Lama's funding a lot of this brain science because Dalai Lama is really interested in science. Dalai Lama is really good for modernity. You know, even if you don't believe that the Dalai Lama is manifestation of the Bodhisattva of compassion, anything like that, say you don't believe any of that, that's fine. The Dalai Lama is an incredible person to have chosen as the leader of Tibet in these times because he is really interested in science. That's one reason. And he's a great diplomat. What are the chances that you got this particular guy? They found him in a rural village. You know that about the Dalai Lama, right? These lamas did some stuff. They saw how the wind blew across the water outside of Lhasa, and they followed this, and they did a lot of other stuff. And they went to this village, and they found a kid. And this kid turned out to be extremely interested in science. All of his life, even when he was a kid in Lhasa, he tried to repair when the air conditioner broke down in Tibet in Lhasa. He went there and tried to fix it. He was this kind of kid that wants to break this stuff down. We all know kids like that, right? And it's really incredible they picked this particular guy. I don't know how it happened. Maybe there was something to this Bodhisattva of compassion, but I think that we're all the Bodhisattvas of compassion. And so he cultivated it, I think. But anyway, it's really interesting to me. If we talk about this, I talked about the part of maintain. If we talk about the tain part and also sustain, the SUS part means sub, it means below, like on the earth, sub. And tain is interesting because it also has Indo-European roots. So I know what happened to it when it went to Sanskrit. And it means to stretch, to pull. And this is also the root of another word we have in Buddhism, and that is Tantra. Tantra. Tantra and Tain, or T-E-N, ten, have the same root, to stretch. And this is really interesting because Tantric Buddhism and Tantric Hinduism is kind of, you might say, a branch of these religions, if we can call Buddhism a religion. A lot of Buddhists that you ask will say, Buddhism is not a religion. Buddhism is a way of life. It's about opening your mind and opening your heart. It's not a religion. A lot of Buddhists will tell you that. Anyway, this idea of Tantra, or stretching, or you might say kind of stretching the limits or testing the limits, is interesting. Tantric Buddhism, what they do is they use devices in order to awaken that are kind of, you might say, dangerous. They use fierce drawings of fierce deities. I don't know, deities is a bad word. Of fierce emanations. You like emanations? Of fierce emanations. Like one of the main kind of drawings they use in Buddhism is Vajrapani. He's the guy with Pani is your hand, Vajra in his hand, and he's got this. It's a weapon. It'll hit you, right? So I mean, you think of Buddhists as they're all peaceful, But in Tantric Buddhism, they kind of flip this, and they use this Tantric image that Vajrapani, he's in this stance, and he's got this Vajra, and he's going like this. It's mean, I'll kill you. And why do you need that? Because we have passions, because we have alcoholism, because we have problems. We need a fierce emanation to knock that out. It's like, oh no, but, be peaceful. Here, have a lotus flower. No, I need Vajrapani. Some people need this, and some, there's good in this kind of thing. It stretches the limits. And every time that Buddhism goes somewhere else, to another country, starts out in India, it goes other places, to Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, to East Asia, to China first, then Korea and Japan. It spreads. And everywhere it goes, it changes, and it stretches, you might say. It tests the limits of things. And it changes. For example, when Buddhism went to China from India, what happened there was, or one of the main things that happened was, well, Chinese have Taoism, and a lot of you know about Taoism. Taoism is you might say, an earth religion. It's a religion that venerates nature, and this is important to me. It's a religion that thinks, basically, I know I'm simplifying it, maybe oversimplifying it, but in general, Taoism believes that society teaches us a lot of things that hurt us, and that naturally humans are good, that human nature is good, and that if you can discover your own nature, that you'll be happy. It's important, be happy, right? Like we can talk philosophy and Kant and everything all day, but are you going to be happy when we're finished? Well, I was happy because it was a good conversation, but I don't know. But anyway, it makes you happy. For example, my students, not you guys, but maybe Emily, but okay, well, you're different because you're married, but Haley, maybe you want to get married. Maybe you're going to graduate. Actually, this doesn't apply to you because you're way beyond this, but anyway, you want to graduate and you're going to, okay, when I get 27, I'm going to get married. Students will tell you this sometimes. Really? Do you have a boyfriend? Are you engaged? No, I don't know. I don't know who I'm going to marry, but when I turn 27, I hear this. I'm going to get married. Really? What are you going to do? Well, first I'm going to get a job, and I'm going to get settled in this job. As soon as I get out of school, I'm going to get a job for $50,000 a year. And then each year after that, I'm going to increase that by, $5,000 or $10,000. So by the time I get married, I'll be sitting right. And then I'm going to get a house, a certain size house. I'm going to have 2 cars, and right? Taoism tells you you're never going to be happy if you believe that, because it doesn't work. Because, like Heraclitus says, you can't stick your foot in the same river twice, that things change. You can't make a plan like that, unless your plan is, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and see what happens. This is kind of the Taoist thing. This is what Buddhism ran into when it came to China. So Buddhism started, we think, Buddha's ancient. When the Buddha of our age, this is how they put it, when the Buddha of our age lived, maybe it was 500 or so BC. And when it finally made it to China, it's like 100 AD. So it's been 500 years or so by the time it makes it to China. When it makes it to China, it meets Taoism. And a lot of things work out really well, that they agree with each other. But the basic message of the Buddha from Indian Buddhism is all life is suffering. We translate it as all life is suffering. That's not quite right. It's dukkha in Pali or in Sanskrit, dukkha. It means all life is perpetual dissatisfaction, that your mind is constantly wanting something you don't have and wanting to get rid of something you do have. And even if even if you have everything that you want, you think now, oh yeah, my car's sitting right, man, I got all these, the rims are just right, or whatever you think, everything's good. A couple years later, you want a new car. It's constant. Your mind's constantly generating this stuff. The Buddha says that. The basic condition of the human life or human mind is dukkha, dissatisfaction. This is kind of a negative outlook, you might say, on life, that the basic human condition is suffering or dissatisfaction. So when it comes to China, they changed it. The Chinese changed it. They said, according to Taoism, the basic condition of human life is Buddha nature, that you all have Buddha nature, and it's in your heart. And that so we're all good, from Mencius, and Chinese philosopher Mencius, that we're all good, basically. Right? This was a long debate that went on in China. Are we basically good or are we basically bad? A long time before Buddhism got there. But by the time Buddhism got there, the Chinese were happy to say that we're all good. So Buddhism we can see changing. And this is good. This is good for Buddhism. And it changes in Tibet, right? It changes everywhere it goes. Okay, it changed in America. But like I said, I think it's good. Here's an example of how it changed in America. The American Buddhist poet laureate Gary Snyder. You guys know Gary Snyder? Gary Snyder studied Zen Buddhism in Japan. He entered monastery. Off and on, he would go there for a year or so, come back to Seattle. He lived in Oregon also. He went to the University of Oregon. And anyway, Gary Snyder is a haiku poet, and he really loves Japanese culture, and he's a Buddhist. And he's very into nature. And so Gary Snyder took it upon himself, which we're all happy he did, to write his own scripture, his own sutra. Sutra is an interesting word. Buddhist sutra, scripture, this is called a sutra in Hinduism too, sutra. Sutra means a stitch, sutra, right? And this is, if you think about it, we have text, in English, text, right? Text also means a stitch, a textile. So it's a cloth, right? Sutra, it's a cloth. It stitches together ideas, but it also stitches together what you write on, sutra. Okay, Gary Snyder wrote his own sutra. I'm not going to tell you the name of it. I'm going to read part of it to you. And this is for America, right? So he's taken Buddhism and he's bringing it to America, basically, and presenting it to us. You can figure out what it's about, maybe quickly. He says, a handsome, smoky-colored brown bear standing on its hind legs, showing that he is aroused and watchful, bearing in his right paw the shovel that digs the truth beneath appearances, cuts the root of useless attachments, and flings the damp sand onto the fires of greed and war. His left paw is in the mudra of camaraderie display. This means don't fear in Buddhism. In camaraderie display, indicating that all creatures have the full right to live to their limits, that the deer, rabbits, chipmunks, snakes, dandelions, and the lizards all grow in the rim of the Dharma, the Dharmakaya, the nature, the rim of the Buddha, the Dharmakaya, wearing the blue overall, symbolic of slaves in labor and countless men and women oppressed by civilization that claim to save but often destroys, wearing the broad brim hat of the West, symbolic of the forces that guard the wilderness, which is the natural state of the Dharma, and the true path of men and women on earth. All true paths lead to the mountain, Gary Snyder says. With a halo of smoke and flame behind, the forest fires of Kali Yuga, the degenerative age. Fires caused by stupidity and those who think that things can be gained and lost, whereas in truth, all is contained in the vast, free blue sky and green earth of one mind. Everybody shares this, of our one mind. Round belly, he shows his kind nature, that the great earth has food enough for everyone who loves her and trusts her, wrathful but calm, austere but comic. Smokey the Bear will illuminate those who would help him, but for those who will slander him, he will put them out. So Gary Snyder writes the Smokey the Bear Sutra, which is kind of good for us, I think. Buddhism believes in a very basic concept of Buddhism is dependent origination. And I think that this is the heart of everything I want to say. The Buddha said, those who see dependent origination sees the Dharma, sees the teachings of the Buddha. Those who don't see dependent origination don't see the Dharma. So the Buddha says basically, this is it. Dependent origination is the thing that I want you to know about. This is the teachings of the Buddha, right? What's dependent origination? Sometimes it's called dependent co-arising. Dependent co-arising means nothing in the universe, none of us, nothing about us, our hair, our bodies, this coat, this table, this car, nothing exists by itself. Everything exists because of something else, because of all other things. The only reason this table got here is because there was a tree, there was nutrients in the earth, there was water, all of these conditions. And that all of us, who we are, is because of conditions. Physically conditions, historical conditions, all of these conditions. And what's the self in all of this? Who am I? As an individual, who am I? Well, you're a collection of causes and conditions that have come from history, come from your parents, come from, I'm in the South, all these other things. I was educated at a certain place, and I was born in this certain era, and all of these other conditions. Yeah, but what is it that I'm calling myself? That's me in Buddhism, right? The self, according to many Buddhists, because of dependent origination, is a poorly delimited set of causes and conditions. I say poorly delimited, I mean, why did we choose these? Like, I'm also these things over here, but I'm not calling, if I cut my arm off, it's not myself. I still have myself. Why? And if I don't breathe, the air's not me. The air's out there, right? I don't know. If I don't breathe, I'm not going to have myself. Well, that means if I cut the rainforest down, my lungs, I'm not going to be able to breathe. So the Buddha says, basically, what you're calling yourself is really a poorly defined group of circumstances that you could have added these other things to. Why did you choose these things to call yourself? Because of some of those conditions that caused you to choose these things. It's a learned thing that we do, and partly learned thing that we do. There's a great metaphor in Buddhism. It's called Indra's net, and it's from the Avatamsaka Sutra. It's from the Flower Garland Sutra. And the Indra's net metaphor says, imagine Indra, the god of the sky. Indra's the thunder god. Imagine Indra has a net, like a fishing net, and it's infinite. It's everywhere. It's space, right? Imagine Indra's net. It's space. It looks like a fish net. And in each of the ties of the fish net, there's a jewel. And each jewel is shining, and it's a mirror. It's both shining and, reflecting and whatever that other one is. It's receiving images. And so there's infinite number of jewels, because the sky, you might say it's the stars, basically. It's the infinite amount of jewels in this net. And each of these jewels reflect all of the other jewels. And this is what the Buddha thinks is like our lives. It's like the mind. There's so much metaphor in this. Because for one thing, it's like a hologram, right? And a lot of scientists will tell you now that space isn't what we thought it is. There's some kind of hologram nature that's going on in space, right? It's funny that this is almost the same thing that the Avatamsaka Sutra says. But it also says something about the mind and who we are. What is it that makes us us? It's kind of an illusion. In a sense, it's an illusion, because we're just reflecting everything else that's around us. In a way, it's an illusion. In a way, the mind's perfect. It's a mirror. It's reflecting, like the Taoists say, if you polish your mysterious mirror, then it's reflecting perfectly. If you cultivate that, if you cultivate the things that allows you to see these things, then your mirror shines perfectly, and you're part of everybody. You're a part of everything that is. So this is, I think, a metaphor for this very idea of dependent origination, or dependent co-arising, that nothing arises on its own, that everything co-arises, dependent on everything else, like every jewel in Indra's net is dependent on all of the other jewels for them to look that way, to shine that way. And that's how we are, according to Buddhism. Okay, I think I'm about out of time, so I'm going to ask Dr. McKeever Floyd if he would please read this another Buddhist sutra that's an old sutra. And this is the Metta Sutra that you guys actually might remember from at the Unitarian Church in the back of the hymnal. This sutra appears in the back of the hymnal. And this is a sutra that is interesting to me for a lot of reasons. For one thing, it talks about peace and sustainability and how we have to cultivate in ourselves in order to radiate this. And if you can do this, you can be like the jewels in Indra's net. And even though the thing that you do seems small, it actually affects everything, because there's dependent co-arising all around us. But another reason it's interesting to me is because this is the scripture that the monks in Myanmar chanted. The Myanmar monks who went out and protested because the gas prices went so high that normal people couldn't buy food or fuel or for their fire to keep warm, or food to eat, or afford to get on the bus and go to work. So the Buddhists joined the protest. You guys remember this, right, a few years ago. And the Myanmar government told them to get back in the Buddhist temple. And they refused. And the people of Myanmar made a shield around them. And they're called, sometimes you hear it, the ochre revolution, because they wear those ochre-colored robes. And so you can see them, like in the New York Times, marching down the road. And the people of Myanmar, the ordinary people, surrounded them so that the government wouldn't kill them. And so they protected them. But the government eventually did open fire and killed some of those monks. Other of those monks were arrested and beaten and thrown into prison. And Hillary Clinton recently went to Myanmar, you guys know, right, just a couple months ago, and she said, we're never going to have relationships with companies to come and set up businesses in Myanmar as long as you have those political prisoners like the Buddhists in prison, and they released them. But they were in prison for years. But Hillary Clinton was actually doing this. The monks chanted this scripture. This is interesting, right? That when the monks went back to their, after the open fire, they opened fire and killed some of them. They went back to their temples and they chanted this scripture. And then they were arrested. The military came and arrested them while they were chanting the scripture. But please, Preston, Dr. McKeever-Floyd. He has a much better voice than me.
This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness, who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the light, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and those to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upward to the skies and downward to the depths, outward and unbounded, free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness. One should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world.
Thank you. Okay, I think I'm about out of time, but if you have questions, anybody questions? Yes, please.
It's interesting how all religions seem to have metaphors, simple things in life that put into metaphors as lessons for people
Yeah,
to follow.
I think so. And metaphors, we were talking about this on Saturday too. We had a talk on Saturday that was a 90-minute walk through world religions. So we had several speakers from mostly our department. But we talked about that as well. Some people noticed that the metaphors that we all used were very similar in different religions. I think in Indian religions, you can see metaphors used for a particular purpose, and that I guess one of the purposes, I should say, would be because something about the truth or some part of the truth is not explainable logically. And so that metaphors and fiction might make you intuit or feel something that you might not feel if we had a logical debate. Yeah.
You said that we're not considered a religion.
Yes, a lot of Buddhists say it's not a religion.
Is there some place where Buddhists go to meet, such as a
Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends on which Buddhist you're talking about. So some Buddhists reject that altogether. Other Buddhists meet to meditate. Other Buddhists meet to debate doctrine. And other Buddhists meet to pray to a Savior Buddha to save them from this suffering. And these are the three big areas in East Asia. Doctrinal Buddhists, Buddhists that have faith in a Savior Buddha, and Buddhists that meditate. And if you go to a Korean Buddhist temple, it's really interesting. They have all three sections. So they're ecumenical. So oftentimes on different floors of the temple, you can go and there'll be a meditation center. You can go and there'll be another floor. There'll be a big image to the Bodhisattva of compassion, or the Savior Buddha, Amitabha. And you can see people in that room bowing down and saying, repeating the name of the Buddha, so that if you repeat it enough, maybe the Buddha will hear you one time. Or if you repeat it enough, maybe one time you'll be so sincere when you say, please help me, that the Savior Buddha will help you. There's a lot of different things going on. So in that sense, it seems very much like a religion. When you have institutions, so we don't have a good definition for religion, right? This is another thing that we were saying in the 90-minute walk through world religions. We don't have a good definition, and any definition that's been proposed, there's always somebody that says, well, that doesn't include us, or this isn't quite right. Religion is that which is of ultimate concern. Well, a lot of people on Wall Street have an ultimate concern. Is that religion? Well, maybe it is. I drink my coffee religiously. So, what's religion is one thing. But I think the Buddhists that say this typically will say, we kind of reject the idea of a hierarchy and that kind of thing. So there's various reasons that they say this. Yes.
I noticed in reference to dependent origination,
yes,
that you did not use the word karma. Does that become a bad word or a terrible word? Or
did you say I did or didn't use the word karma?
Did not.
Oh, okay. No, karma's okay. But I understand your question, I think, because karma seems to imply rebirth, that karma came from a previous life, right? And it's really interesting what's going on, and I think this is what you're getting at, if I understand you. It's really interesting because I said everywhere Buddhism goes, it changes. And in America, we haven't had this tradition of rebirth. And some people believe it and some people don't. And some people want to be Buddhist, but they can't believe in rebirth, right? They can't believe in reincarnation. And this is interesting because recently, some of you guys will know Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh is a famous Buddhist from Vietnam, and he was nominated by Dr. King for a Nobel Prize because he was active, anti-war activist in Vietnam at the time of the Vietnam War. But Thich Nhat Hanh is extremely famous. He has a lot of books we have in our library here at Coastal, and he has Plum Village in France, and it's a meditative place, and he has followers all over the world. He's extremely famous. But recently, in an interview I read with Thich Nhat Hanh, the person interviewing him asked him about rebirth. And he said, anybody who believes in rebirth is not a Buddhist. He said, because Buddhists don't believe in an essence that can be reborn. Buddhists just believe in causes and conditions, that things are changing. You can be reborn in the sense that we never die because of conditions, and your karma, in this sense, continues. My karma is my history. My karma is what I did to my kids. And it's going to go on, and they're going to do something to their kids. I shouldn't have yelled at her that time. Or whatever, right? In that sense, it's your karma. So there's a lot of different things. In Yogacara Buddhism, that's a philosophical school of Buddhism, they believe that your karma is your history, for example. That, let's see. Oh, and by the way, it's also interpreted in Yogacara, which is an old type of Buddhism from India, but also in American Buddhism, that rebirth happens in this lifetime. So you guys that, when I tell my students this and they're 18, 19 years old, they're like, I don't understand what you're saying. But if I tell some of you guys, you'll understand. I've lived a lot of lives in this lifetime. I'm not the same guy I was when I was 20 in a lot of ways, So we're reborn a lot of times. And Kukai, a famous Japanese tantric Buddhist, says this also, that rebirth happens within your lifetime, that you transform yourself, that things change a lot of time. So that in this karma, it's history, and it's all of these things that you do and the things that you think. And it's interesting also about karma. The earliest usage of karma from the Rig Veda, because Rig Veda is the earliest writing from Hinduism in India. And the word karma only means action. It doesn't mean the repercussions of your action. It only means action. Scholars can trace, at what point did it come to mean the repercussions of your actions? Around the Upanishadic period, around 700 BC, it came to mean the repercussions of your action. At what point does your repercussions of your action transfer to your next life? At what point after that does the repercussions, can I transfer my merit to you? So I'm going to go to Shikoku this summer in Japan. I'm going to do a pilgrimage to 88 Buddhist temples. And I can transfer my merit to you. If you have a problem, like you did something bad, I can give you my merit. Where did that come from? It's all the karma theory. But you can trace it, the changes. And I think you can trace a change going on now, like you're implying in America, that there's this change to reinterpret karma and rebirth. Do you have questions?
Can you explain what is the real meaning of nirvana?
I can, in fact. But I have to tell you, I can only give you kind of a definition, but not, here's nirvana. I wish I could do the last one. That would be grace, right? If I could give you, by touching you or something, give you grace. Nirvana is extinction. And this extinction can be viewed in several ways. It means extinction of your passions, extinction of that basic instinct in your mind to want something you don't have and to get rid of something that you do have, because the mind's activity is to do that. The Buddha says the only way you're going to ever be satisfied is if you stop doing that, if you're happy with what you have. How do we do that? Since it's the basic impulse of the mind, how do you do that? You follow 8 steps, the 8-step program, the Eightfold Path.
Yes.
And so you reach nirvana, you reach extinction. You can reach nirvana as extinction by the 8 steps, the Eightfold Path. So that's one view of nirvana. But it's also, as Dr. McKee before he read it in the Metta Sutra, which I don't know if I said this, but I meant to. Metta means loving kindness. So it's radiating loving kindness to all beings. You at the end of that scripture, it says, and you're no longer born. You're not born again. This means you're extinct. You have extinguished. In ancient India, this is a good thing. My daughter once said to me, oh, in Buddhism, you can live forever, right? Because you're reborn over and over, you can just live forever. And I was like, if that's true for the Buddhist groups that believe that, it's a punishment. We don't want to live forever. We want extinction. We want nirvana. We want to realize ultimate truth and be ultimate truth. We want to realize our Buddha nature, and that's nirvana. Yeah. And one last thing about that. Because nirvana is a good thing in Chinese Buddhism, it's not like, oh, it's extinction, you're going to die and that's it. Doesn't sound too good. In Chinese Buddhism, this is your Buddha nature. And so there's a saying from Chinese Buddhism, but you might be able to find it in Indian Buddhism also, that tathata, which is suchness, I'll describe in a minute, is the same as samsara. So tathata is samsara. This means if you purify your mind, if you cultivate truth and goodness inside you, there's a qualitative change in your outlook, in your mind, and you'll see the world different. You'll see the world as it is. You'll see the connectedness. As the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree during the second watch of the night, he saw dependent origination. He saw the connectedness of all beings. Then the third watch, he reached nirvana. So you see this interconnectedness, and the saying in Chinese means if you can see that nature in yourself as it really is, this is the same as samsara, the cycles of rebirth. In other words, the stuff you're saying is bad, that the Buddhists and Hindus say, I need to escape the cycles of rebirth, samsara. No. Suchness, seeing things like it is, such. We can't describe it because it's beyond ideas. It's seeing things like it is. That is the same as the things that you're considering suffering and rebirth and so forth. In this very world, you can experience nirvana. You don't have to die, according to that Chinese view. Thank you. Okay, thanks for coming, everybody. Look forward to seeing you again.